Before we start up, check out the Dork Album Volume 1. You can pre-order it now right off of Indiegogo. Support the channel. Let's do the thing. Learn a little something. Take a lesson. Learn it all.
Yo, this is Dorky Diggity Dave, and today I'm back again with Luke, the executive producer on Marvel Contest of Champions. How are you, sir?
Oh, pretty good. Surviving the con.
Yeah, same here. Got the same voice I had last year, I just want to keep it consistent.
Yeah, by day 4, everything's just shot.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you a couple questions about MCOC, specifically longevity. You've already been out for almost 5 years, and your announcements say that you want to push this between 5 and 10 years longer.
Yeah.
So what kind of things can we come to expect without spoiling it to keep that roadmap going?
For sure. Reiterate that again. When it comes to contests, we want to look at how can we keep this game going for another 5, 10 plus years, right? We've been super fortunate with all the success we've had in these past 5 years. And now it's just a game of cool. How do we keep our core audience engaged? How do we bring back all the people that played for a day, a week, a month, or a year, and then stop playing? How do we re-engage all those players, get them back into the game? So when we look at long term, especially into next year, a lot of it is for the existing core game that we have right now, right? Is for the game modes, content is how do we? It's kind of like dual sided, right? It's on game modes, how do we make that? Our eternal term for it is evergreen, but for player facing, it's really how do we keep those modes really engaging for you, right? If you remember back to the early days of Alliance Quest and Alliance Wars, we released Alliance Wars and then we didn't update it for a year and a half, and it got super stale, and then that's a really bad state. And then we're starting to get to a state now for Alliance Quest and Alliance Wars where we're adding systems to the game and what the attempt is to keep those game modes fresh on a more regular basis without us having to do major content updates. Because when we do a good example is when we do we add a new map to AQ or we do a major map rework in AW, it's a huge amount of investment for us and time and testing to get that stuff right. And so that's months of work to be able just to deploy one new map that players are probably going to adapt to within a few months, right? Even shorter. And so what we're looking at doing over the next year, next year as well as on successive years, is what kind of additional systems can we add to our core game modes to keep those modes fresh on a more regular basis for players like you, right? So that, in Alliance Wars, it doesn't get stagnant where it's once you run your path 3-4 times, cool, it the back of your hand, you don't have to worry about it. And that was kind of an initial attempt with defensive tactics, right? Was looking at how can we add something that adds a little bit of variety every single time you go into a war, or gives more player agency over how they set up their defense, so that every time you go into it, it feels a little bit different, and you have to go through a decision-making process of what's the roster I bring in, and do I have to change my play style up? And I think we got a lot more work to do for Alliance Wars. Alliance Quest is going to have something similar coming out this fall, which is going to be really cool, where I think we talked about high level, but essentially selectable buffs for AQ, where a lot of alliances get into a state where you run map 5x5s, 6-6 and then 5 for the rest of the week, or you just run map 6 all week. And it's kind of the same deal where it's okay, well, base stats get harder between days 1 to 5. But really, there's not a whole lot of variance to it. And if you're one of those alliances that's kind of stuck at the map 5 wall, you want to eventually be able to jump up to map 6, but maybe the time investment's too much or the complexity's a bit much for your alliance. Selectable buffs, what we want to do is have it where, just straight up, is alliances can decide on these buffs for each day of AQ that essentially adds another layer of challenge. And by doing that additional layer of challenge, there's essentially a separate track of rewards that you can earn out of it. And what we want those rewards to be is kind of a little bit of that bridge between those gaps in maps, right? If you're running map 5, you're getting plenty of T4 stuff. Yep. But if you're at a point where you got 5 stars, 6 stars, you need T5B, you need T2A. And so we want to try and provide it as a little bit of that bridge to help you kind of get to that point where you can start to run map 6 potentially. And so that's something we're looking at. That's an example of what we're doing for longevity. Dungeons is a mode that you could use some love, and we got some plans for that coming up soon. But then also, as we look even further forward, right, it's looking at what other game modes can we bring to the game that would keep players engaged. Solo, player versus player game, competitive stuff is an opportunity in the game that there's not really anything in the game that really does that, right? You kind of have 1v1 arenas and 3v3 arenas, but that's not really competitive play, right? And so that's an area of the game that we're also looking at. How can we provide a new cool game mode that will really engage players? It just keeps you folks engaged for long periods of time, right? And elongating the game's lifespan. So yeah, that's examples of what we're kind of looking at.
Learn a little something. Take a lesson. Learn it all.